Good afternoon, and welcome to the Goldstein Theater, part of the Kupferberg Center for the Arts. This is our annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration, and we're proud to continue this annual tradition to recognize a heroic martyr of this nation who came right here to Queens College in 1965 to deliver a speech in the then new Colden Auditorium. And we are profoundly grateful and humbled to partner with the Borough President, our Borough President here in the world's Borough, the great Donovan J. Richards Jr. A big round of applause. Now, I ask you, please rise physically or spiritually for the playing of the Black National Anthem. Lift every voice and sing. This will be performed by our very own Aaron Copeland School of Music graduate students, vocalist Isema Leonard and pianist Nathan Faraz.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
I'd like to thank the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Planning Committee for outstanding dedication. The committee was led by two co-chairs, our Dean of Diversity and Chief Diversity Officer, and diversity is still celebrated here. It's at the core of everything that we do. That's Jerima DeWeese, and the Dean of Arts and Humanities, Simone Yearwood. Please turn your attention to the screen, which features all the members of the committee. They're all listed right there, and the offices that have supported this event. Many thanks. Welcome to the Queens County and New York City community, the college department chairs, members of the cabinet, faculty, staff, students, and alumni, and all of you. You are all VIPs, and you are always, each and every one of you, welcome year-round on our beautiful campus. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a man, a hero, whose words and actions continue to guide and inspire us, not just this day, but throughout the year. Even though decades have passed, his message of justice, equality, and hope is alive and even more needed now than ever. At Queens College, we try to live every day the values that Dr. King stood for through our community projects, our advocacy for students who are so deserving, and our educational programs. We like to strengthen the connections to the community as a civic institution on campus and throughout the neighborhood. Our motto in Latin is Discimus et Serviamus, which translated into English means we learn so that we may serve. We're so proud of our own historic connection to Dr. King. After the brutal murders of Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, who were registering voters in the Deep South, two of the trio, which was mixed in ethnicity and faith, two of them having connections to Queens College and CUNY, Dr. King came to visit Colden Auditorium in May of 1965, and he left us with insights in a speech that was so powerful. Society has moved ahead in many ways thanks to his efforts and those whom he led, but we know there's still much important work ahead, even, perhaps especially, right now, right here. So that's why we do this event every Sunday before the holiday as a reminder to stay committed to that equitable future, the fairer, the more just future that Dr. King foresaw for us, our children and grandchildren. And now we'd like to invite up to the podium someone we're fortunate to have as a leader here, whose inaugural will occur in just a week right here on this beautiful campus, a loyal supporter of Queens College, co-sponsor of today's event, a champion of public higher education as the engine of the American dream. His leadership through capital funding on this campus and for the other CUNY institutions throughout Queens, our sisters, Queensborough Community College, LaGuardia Community College, York, and the School of Law, that builds on his great record of support for education, which he started when he was at the New York City Council. He created the Immigrant Welcome Center at Borough Hall and is seen frequently at events at this campus. Let's have a warm welcome for the Queens Borough President, recently reelected Donovan J. Richards, Jr.
It is good to see so many of you here today as we celebrate a man who, through his struggle, made so many of our own dreams a reality. Thank you to my good friends, CUNY Chancellor Felix Matos Rodriguez, and of course our Queens College President. Let's give it up for Frank Wu and his team, Jeff and Jay, and all of their capable staff who put this event together each and every year. You do so much to help the young people of our borough and city to get the quality college education that they deserve. Might I add, my sister is an alum of this campus as well. So let's give it up for them once again and their entire team for what they do. Today, this school honors Dr. King, the giant, but this school also honors his legacy every single day by helping the diverse student body fulfill their dreams and reach their highest potential. Students of all colors, races, religions, ethnicities, sexual orientations, and gender identities gather here each and every day in the noble pursuit of higher education. They are aided by teachers, staff members, and administrators committing to help all Queens College students secure a better future for themselves and their families. And it's no wonder why Dr. King visited Queens College on May 13, 1965. He came here to pay tribute to Andrew Goodman, Queens College student and a civil rights activist who was brutally murdered in Mississippi 1 year earlier while trying to register Black residents to vote. Andrew embodied allyship and all that makes Queens College and this borough great. Speaking about Andrew, Dr. King said that he, along with others, paid the supreme price for this struggle. And I'm sure that we will see in many ways that his death and their deaths were not in vain. When you take a look around this campus, there's evidence all around us that both of their deaths were not in vain. And I know for a fact that I would not have been the first Black man elected to be your borough president if Dr. King and civil rights movement did not exist. Queens would not be the world's greatest melting pot, where all our cultures and creeds can achieve anything if it weren't for Andrew's sacrifice. But we know darn well, 2026, that the great progress that we've made is now being undermined. And over the past year, we've seen a Trump administration work tirelessly to erase Black history and to kneecap the future of our Black community. In broad daylight, the president is systemically attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion. But make no mistake that this borough will stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion all the way around. We see them attacking our healthcare, gerrymandering congressional districts, targeting voting rights and immigrant rights. But we will once again say proudly in this borough of 190 countries, in 360 languages and dialects that are spoken every day, that we will never build walls in Queens County, that we will build bridges in Queens County. But we know all too well why they want to dismantle this. They are terrified of Black expression at the ballot box. They're intimidated by Black excellence. They cringe at the thought of Black leadership. And what we are seeing coming out of Washington is a stain on our nation and a slap in the face to all that Dr. King stood for. But we in Queens are not going to sit idly by while they try to take away the hard-fought gains of the civil rights movement. Because Americans of all faiths, nationalities, and political persuasions have the obligation to be active participants in our democracy. And that means being willing to speak out against injustice wherever and wherever it occurs, no matter who is committing it. It means standing with our brothers and sisters in Minnesota as they were attacked by ICE agents unjustly. Because we all share one common humanity, and that means all of us, including our leaders, at the highest levels of government have the obligation to treat people with kindness and respect and dignity. And it also means we can never allow hatred among individuals and groups to fester. For the festering of such hatred will only take us further away from the ideal America that Dr. King envisioned. In Dr. King's ideal America, people of all creeds and backgrounds will all live together in harmony as brothers and sisters. Today, it seems we are getting further away from that ideal, but it is not too late to change course. And we can change our nation's course if we follow Dr. King's lead and speak out for what is right. Because at the end of the day, we are all called to be of service. Service to ourselves, our community, our city, and our country. It's what Dr. King was all about. And by heeding Dr. King's call to service, we can build the ideal community he dreamed of. We can start building it right here in our city, in our country, and especially in Queens County. That being said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. May we all stand up against injustice when we see it. May we all stand firmer together in our belief that the dream that Dr. King had is still alive. And while you might have killed the dreamer, they have not killed the dream. Happy MLK Day to everyone. God bless you. May God bless the United States of America.
Of course, here we are all about students, 16,000 strong. And so here to greet the entire audience on behalf of the student body should be William Barron.
Today's theme, where do we go from here? It's not just a question, it is a call to our hearts, our minds, and our actions. When I think about that question, I don't hear it as a history. I hear it as something deeply personal. Because every step of my leadership journey here at Queens College has been shaped by moments where I had to ask myself, where do I go from here? There were times when I felt unheard, times when I felt invisible, times would it have been easier to stay silent. But I learned something powerful. Silence never changes anything. Growth happens when we stand up. Healing happens when we come together. And real change happens when we refuse to give up on each other. I have firsthand what community looks like. I have watched students walk in feeling lost and walked out feeling empowered. I have seen what happens when we create space where people finally feel safe to speak, to be themselves, to be seen. This campus is filled with dreams. First-generation students, veterans rebuilding their lives, students balancing work, family, and school. Every single one of those students' stories matters. Dr. King believed that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. He believed service could change the world. And I believe that same power lives right here in this room. Where do we go from here? We go to the places that need our courage. We go to the conversations we've been avoiding. We go to the people who feel forgotten. We choose community over comfort. We choose justice over silence. We choose love over hate. Because Dr. Martin Luther King taught us that hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So today, I challenge you, be brave, be kind, be bold. Share for something bigger than yourself. Help someone who feels invisible. Speak up when something isn't right, because when future generations ask, what did you do when it mattered? I want to say, I stood up, I served, I cared. Let us honor Dr. King, not just with a holiday, but with a lifetime of action. Thank you. Enjoy.
Now, I would ask you to please direct your attention to the screen behind me for the premiere of the Queens College 6th installment of its MLK Day video series. This began in 2021. It was an idea conceived by Vice President for Communications and Marketing and Senior Advisor to the President, Jay Hershenson, a double alum of Queens College. He's never left. And it's in recognition of our own iconic role as part of the civil rights movement. This was followed by an in-depth exploration of Dr. King's visit that has been alluded to. In 2023, the series explored the story behind the Democrat Convention in Atlantic City in 1964. And then in 2024, we commemorated the anniversary of the brutal killings of the civil rights workers, Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, which shocked the nation. And just last year, we looked at the extensive civil rights archive housed here in our Rosenthal Library. This year, we celebrate the 60th anniversary of the City University of New York's Search for Education, Elevation, and Knowledge program, SEEK, named for Percy E. Sutton. This was created and produced by our own Office of Communications and Marketing. It will be on YouTube and throughout social media after today, so you are the first to be able to see this professional, high-quality video honoring SEEK.
The year was 1966, and the sky was not the limit. The space race dominated headlines when the Soviet Union bested America with a soft landing on the moon. Months later, America's NASA Surveyor 1 touched down on the lunar surface.
Tonight, Surveyor 1, designed to soft land on the moon, is making its final approach.
But on the city and town streets of our nation, faraway moonshots were not at the forefront of the minds of those fighting for social, educational, and economic justice. The civil rights movement was growing louder and more determined and even dangerous. In Mississippi, the March Against Fear saw James Meredith get shot and then survive. The march continued and inspired thousands to register to vote.
So much happened in 1966. Stokely Carmichael takes over as chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, deposing John Lewis, and takes it in this much more militant direction. In the middle of the Meredith March, he unleashes the chant of Black Power. We want Black Power! The Black Panther Party is formed in Oakland, California.
And in Chicago, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. moved into a tenement in a poor neighborhood. He sought to dramatize the need for affordable housing and to counter segregation in neighborhoods and schools. There were calls for the establishment of Black Studies programs, and campus protests demanded colleges and universities enroll more students from underrepresented groups. 1 year earlier, in May 1965, Dr. King spoke in Colton Auditorium at Queens College about the need for greater educational access.
The problem is becoming even more critical today because of a lack of educational opportunities, because of discrimination, because of a denial of apprenticeship training. We as a people have been limited by and large to unskilled and semi-skilled labor, not because we didn't have the ability to do the job, but because opportunities denied us the training necessary to do them.
Here in New York State, Governor Nelson Rockefeller and the state legislature were negotiating the budget in Albany during the winter of 1966. CUNY officials, well aware of campus protests connected with civil rights struggles, began working with Black and Puerto Rican legislators to craft a new university program.
We wanted to create a program so that the injured of our society could occupy positions of power. The term SEEK came out of that.
We decided to set up a program under which we would have criteria that would enable these young people to be admitted to the City University.
Education gives people the tools with which to compete in the marketplace. Without it, you're walking around with a real handicap. With it, you have a chance to compete.
Much is made of the so-called midnight march. We met with Tony Travia.
We explained to him that there would be the inability for him to be re-elected speaker if our votes were not available. That night, the Sikh program was born.
On July 5th, 1966, the Search for Education, Elevation, and Knowledge program, known as Sikh, was signed into law. It provided academic, financial, and counseling support to qualified City University of New York students who were economically and educationally disadvantaged. Sikh became the model for numerous special programs, including at CUNY, private colleges, and throughout the nation.
I give God and Percy Sutton credit for starting Sikh, EOP, HEOP, because if that was not in the budget, I don't think I was smart enough to have developed and do all the research and come up with the finding.
Since then, Sikh has served as an invaluable ladder for upward social mobility, helping hundreds of thousands earn an education and become contributing members and leaders of the community. In 2010, the New York State Legislature named the Sikh program in honor of Percy Ellis Sutton, the former state legislator and Manhattan Borough president.
The Sikh program is such an important part of my grandfather's legacy. Of all the things that he did, the Sikh program was one of the two things that he was most proud of. Education has always been the most defining vehicle for advancement and kind of the avenue to the middle class.
A Sikh or CD student knows the value of an education because somebody is showing them the value and showing them how to get the most out of the experience while they're here so they could be leaders of tomorrow. When you meet an alum of a CD or a Sikh program, they're almost always in a field that's helping other people.
At Queens College, the Sikh program has had many success stories.
When a Sikh student first comes, they must fulfill a summer program. We give them a workout with reading and writing and math. So it's kind of like they sit in their fall classes ahead of the game.
People I know on whom the program was so impactful that they then returned and became Sikh directors. You have legislators in Albany. You have business people all over New York City.
Alumnus Adriano Espaillat, Congress member in New York's 13th Congressional District, is a 1978 Sikh graduate.
The Sikh program gave me great opportunities. Little did I know, as a young man, that as a Sikh student, that I would then become an assembly member myself and fight for this program.
Khalil Anderson, class of 2019, became the youngest ever black male assembly member after his election in 2020.
To take what I learned at the program, the advocacy that I learned, the organizing that I learned and sharpened, the ability to make relationships that I learned and sharpened. Because of the Sikh program, I'm a product of the hard work that Professor Blackman Richards and the various directors, leaders, counselors, academic advisors that held me up. Family and camaraderie was what allowed me to be successful in the Sikh program and paved the way to run for public office, to represent their wants, their needs, their demands, because they were my wants, my needs, and demands as a student and as an organizer on campus.
Alumna Carmine Kulut, class of 2019, former Student Association president, is now pursuing her PhD at Cornell University.
Every semester that I teach at Queens College, I make sure to highlight the Sikh program and its achievements. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Sikh program. A lot of my academic success has been because of the support of the Sikh student as an undergraduate student. I have a sense of achievement And I know that this is a school that produces leaders, and this is a school that will produce the next civil rights leaders that are engaged, that are informed, and that have a passion for the people.
They have to commit themselves to the personal pursuit of excellence. They need to be the very best that they can be.
The excellence. That's what I see in these SEEK graduates. 20, 30, 40, 50% of the SEEK graduates are graduating at the very highest level of their classes. That speaks to the excellence that is poured into SEEK students and lifted out of SEEK students by their directors and their staffs.
For 60 years, SEEK has opened the doors to education, to leadership, and to change, allowing students to pursue their dreams. Thanks to the great civil rights leaders like Dr. King and visionary educators, programs like SEEK are here to stay.
I was selected by the President of the United States to be a delegate to one of the most important conferences that the United States engages in. It was then called the G7 conference. And when I got to South Africa, there were numerous young people who were doing advanced work who came to celebrate with me to talk about how beneficial the SEEK program had been and to thank me for my participation.
Carol Jenkins, esteemed journalist, author, and civil rights advocate, you have devoted your entire career, your life, to advancing racial and gender justice in the spirit of Dr. King. Originally from Alabama, you moved to New York City at a young age, growing up on Merrick Boulevard in Jamaica, Queens, and you've been making your mark on the borough, the city, the state, and the nation ever since. From your groundbreaking work as an Emmy award-winning broadcast journalist, amplifying the stories of inequality, to your leadership as founding president of the Women's Media Center and later as president and CEO of the ERA Coalition and Fund for Women's Equality, you've been a driving force behind national efforts. This advocacy has helped to build broad, inclusive coalitions committed to dismantling those systematic barriers and expanding civil rights protections for each and every human being. You serve as the host of Black America on CUNY TV and continue to be so highly respected and effective as an activist and communicator. In recognition of your many decades of courageous service and unwavering commitment, we are so pleased to invite the borough president to present you with a special proclamation. Here's the borough president.
On behalf of all 2.4 million people in Queens County and growing, the world's borough, I salute and thank Carol Jenkins for her many years of outstanding contributions to the betterment of our society. Congratulations.
Before you speak, Ms. Jenkins, we're also pleased, Queens Colleges, to present you with a token of our esteemed recognition, a certificate recognizing you as our 2026 Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Speaker. It's a commemoration. The screen behind me is showing the list of the prior impressive winners of this annual award. And we have a gift for you, a framed picture that we designed showing a collage of prominent moments from your illustrious career.
Wow, what a production. But, you know, Queens knows how to do it, right? Thank you so much. It is absolutely my honor to be included in this program today that has already had so many moving comments about Martin Luther King, about Queens, about the time that we're in. So it is my honor. And now that's, you know, Foch Boulevard and 170th Street in Queens, you know, where I love it. It's the first time that it's actually gotten an applause, you know. I say it all the time, you know. But if you're not a Queens person, you don't really appreciate what that means. To President Frank Wu, Queensborough President Donovan Richards, and King Day Planning Committee co-chairs Simone Yearwood and Jeremy DeWeese, my dear friend Jay Hershenson, who, by the way, was responsible for my getting the job of hosting Black America on CUNY TV, and we're celebrating 10 years, almost 300 interviews, conversations. So thank you, Jay, and we're delighted to have CUNY trustee Sandra Wilkin, who is the vice chair here today. We were talking about some of the amazing progress that's taken place with this university. We're celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. We're also remembering the ultimate sacrifice of student Andrew Goodman. Here in the county of Queens, home to over 1 million immigrants representing some 160 countries, making it, I think, the most diverse county in the country, maybe even the world. So congratulations on that. And also, Queens, as we know, is the former home of a Democratic Socialist mayor, Zoran Mandami, much in the mold of Social Democrat Martin Luther King Jr. So he got it honestly. Congratulations to President Wu, Queens College, for its formidable diversity. I cannot tell you how proud I am of that. The national ranking and it being such an esteemed place of learning. So Queens, I arrived in this community called Jamaica, Queens as a 3-year-old in the middle of, if you can appreciate the irony of the 1947 blizzard in Queens, where 27 inches of snow fell, drifts that were 10 feet high. And I always said, what a welcome for a 3-year-old coming from quite hot Lowndes County, Alabama. And here we are today, snowstorm. It's a thing. It's a Queens thing, and I feel so welcome. My small family was a part of a massive migration of Americans from the rural South that lasted from the early 1900s to probably 1970. More than 6 million people came north seeking work during and after 2 world wars. We were among the first immigrants, so to speak, who came to Queens. Among those were hundreds of thousands of Black people who left less than satisfactory circumstances, looking for a better life. We moved to a corner house, an attached brick and stone Tudor. You probably will recognize my house if you go over to Foch Boulevard and 170th Street, right on the edge of the historic Black enclave known as St. Albans and the historically landmarked Adsley Park. We always said we were from St. Albans, if we were trying to impress, but and Adsley Park if we were really in, where the likes of historian W.E.B. Du Bois, Billie Holiday, Lena Horne, Jackie Robinson, and Count Basie moved in the 1940s and the 1950s. It was the suburban extension of the Harlem Renaissance in the 20s and 30s. So that cultural seating and circumstances that took place. So I want to say that I never met Martin Luther King Jr., but the impact that he had on my life was phenomenal. And I had to look it up again. It was 1964 that I actually, Queens girl, somehow got on a plane and went to Lincoln, Nebraska to see Martin Luther King Jr. It was a Christian event. Thousands of people gathered on Lincoln, Nebraska. And one of the things that I learned, in addition to hearing his marvelous, compelling way of addressing our situation, was that in Lincoln, Nebraska, if there was a stop sign that said, "Do not walk," nobody walked. It was the most astonishing thing, being from Queens. So there were 2 experiences there, and I looked around and I said, what's the matter? Nobody's crossing the street. And somebody said, "Don't you see that sign? It says, 'Don't walk.'" I said, in Queens, we never pay attention to things like that. So But I did when I arrived at Boston University in 1962. Martin Luther King was already a national hero. He had received his PhD in theology from BU in 1955. He had also led by then the bus boycott with Rosa Parks in Montgomery. And I was privileged enough to meet his spiritual advisor, the theologian Howard Thurman, the dean of Marsh Chapel at BU. It was Thurman's exposure to Mahatma Gandhi in India and Thurman's influence on King that led to the movement of change that we know of as peaceful nonviolence. Our second connection was my family farm. If you're going to talk about the confluence of this, the Gardner Farm in Lowndes County, Alabama, where I spent the first 3 years of my life, which was the third stopover in the historic 50-mile march King led from Selma to Montgomery. On the soggy night of March 23rd of 1965, the marchers gathered and slept on our front lawn in preparation for entering the city of Montgomery the next day. That property, which is still in our family, had been gifted to my grandmother from her father, Hugh Carson, who served in the Alabama legislature during Reconstruction. Recently, last year, our family at our family church in Lowndes County had a celebration of that historic march, which was more personal than the gigantic one that we all know of everyone crossing the bridge and whatever. So this was a family celebration. But as a part of that was one of the marchers who was a teenager and walked that walk. We got the impression that her parents had pressed her into service. She wasn't exactly, eager to do it, but she did it nevertheless. But one of the things that she never knew was the farm that she slept on the third night was owned by a Black family. She always assumed, that it was what Black families owned farms in Lowndes County, Alabama. So we brought her back to the farm and showed her around. And it was one of those moments of, we know that we're part of history, but to be able to share that with someone who spent her time walking those 50 miles and to have her be able to say and to know that that was a Black-owned farm was really quite something for us. And now the third connection was through my uncle, A.G. Gaston, the Birmingham businessman who posted bail for Martin Luther King in the spring of 1963. I don't know whether you remember that. That's where what came out of that jailing was the letter from a Birmingham jail, which we've used, as a symbol of resistance and of his bravery ever since. My daughter and I wrote a book about our uncle, A.G. Gaston, called Black Titan. And we always laugh about the fact that while my uncle, at President Kennedy's insistence, bailed him, got him out of jail, Martin Luther King did not want to come out of jail. It was a negotiation. We always talk about the negotiating with the negotiator. A.G. Gaston saying to Martin Luther King, "Sir, you cannot stay here. You have got to come out." And Martin Luther King, who believed that for the effort for the march, it would be better for him to stay. Fortunately, he had written on scraps of paper and on the edges of a newspaper the letter from a Birmingham jail. And so we know from that point on, that his comment that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere was written in that jail. And I don't know, maybe my uncle should have let him stay there a little bit longer. We'd have gotten much, much, much more. As we commemorate what would have been King's 97th birthday, I do believe, it's hard to count up that high as you get closer to that. For some of us in this country, we're in a state of grief, of fear, of uncertainty, because we see erasure. We see the collapse of the mainstream media that we've counted on for information. We see academia under threat. We see immigrants, like the rest of us, who have all been immigrants in one way or another, under threat. In his years as a leader in the civil rights movement, I wanted to take a look at something that doesn't get talked about a lot when you think about Martin Luther King, and that was that what he had written in his last years of life, the book, where do we go from here? Do we go to chaos, or do we does it lead to community? He wrote what he felt had happened with all of his major work. He said there's decency and indecent that people respond to. There's equality rights, equal rights that we all want. And then there are human rights, humanity. What's humane? And he saw that our country at the end of his life, because the book was written a year before he died, that the country had failed. And what I see is that we still are there. So what is indecency? Indecency for him was that he felt that the reason that civil rights, voting rights were enacted was that the country and the president found dogs snarling at small children indecent, and something had to be done. They were working on the Constitution, where there was a format, a blueprint for equal rights. And so he felt that they got somewhere, civil rights, voting rights that happened under his watch, we can say, but not full equality. And that was because what we really needed then, as we do now, are human rights. So the question for him was, does a human being deserve, well, we know we can vote, right? That's happened. But does a human being in a country deserve housing, food, and education, security, peace? And that's a question for all of us to answer, because still our country is lacking that. Now, we can get distracted by the drama of every single day, some new thing happening that outrages us. But the thing that remains, that has not changed since Martin Luther King's day to this day, is poverty in this country. And he felt that what was at the base of this country's dis-ease, in the concept of dis-ease, not so much disease, but it is a disease, was the fact that people could not eat. And what he said was, our continuing struggle grows out of the fact that there are still two Americas. One is the habitat of men and women who have food and material necessities for their bodies, culture and education for their minds, freedom and dignity for their spirits. But there is another America. It is an America inhabited by millions of people who are poverty-stricken aliens, is what he said. Poverty-stricken aliens in an affluent society. They are too poor to even rise with the society, too impoverished by the ages to be able to ascend using their own resources. So long as these two Americas exist, there must be a continuing struggle for what he called then, and we call now, human rights. I'm now reading the autobiography of one of King's longest advisors, the Reverend James Lawson. It's called Nonviolent, a memoir of resistance, agitation, and love. Lawson was also trained in the principles of Gandhi, spent time in India, and he was by Martin Luther King's side through so many of the victories and the challenges. And Lawson was the reason that Martin Luther King was in Memphis in 1968. And he had come because of the other America. Impoverished sanitation workers were on strike. They were poorly paid Black men, and I think you've seen the signs that they use in I Am a Man to insist to the world that these were human beings, these were men who were striking, because and there had been the desire to do that for a long time, but until a badly damaged truck, a machine that they used to collect garbage, literally consumed two of their workers, dragged them in, killed them. They went out on strike, and Martin Luther King was asked by the Reverend James Lawson to come, because this was poverty at its worst. Lawson talks about they did a study, which I think we really need to do again, where they had a committee and they sent it through the neighborhoods, interviewing people who lived there to find out what was wrong. And as the people did the interviews, we're talking about 60s, late 60s, they came across all of these babies with bloated, extended stomachs, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And of course, St. Jude's Hospital, which was the only hospital, by the way, who decided to take these babies in and to care for them, and they were Black children, and other hospitals wouldn't. What the doctor said was, these are starving babies. They have no food. And Lawson writes that the St. Jude doctors treated the babies without charge. They told us the babies were malnourished because their families were starving too. And the prescription was simple: food, but food for the whole family. King's solution, and once again, no one has asked, as Martin Luther King went through his life, he did a lot of things that people said he had no business interfering with, including the Vietnam War. He said, this is wrong, and they told him, that's not your business. Take care of your people. Mind your own business. But he was convinced that that the economic system of our country was based inefficiently, and that he said, I am now convinced that the simplest approach will prove to be the most effective. The solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by a now widely discussed measure, the guaranteed income. Oh my goodness, think about that. In America, where every single person who lives in this country has a basic income so that they don't starve, so that they have a place to live, so that they can get an education, they don't die, they'll have health care. It's incredible. It's still what we are working for here. It's still a widely discussed solution. Robin Hood, by the way, that does research on poverty in New York, has estimated we're not only talking about people that we know who are poor, impoverished, who need help. We're talking about 4 out of 5 people who live in New York City cannot afford their housing and their food. They struggle to meet those 2 needs. 4 out of 5. We're talking about everybody. And the researchers who are doing that, again, have said, we need to do something about this. So my friend, Jeff Madrick, who's an economics writer and a huge proponent of a basic income in the model of Martin Luther King, has said his book was The Case for Big Government. And he said, that's what government is for. It gave us Social Security. It gave us Medicare. And in his book on child poverty, The Invisible Americans, the tragic cost of child poverty, he lobbies for substantial cash grants to all families with children, regardless of income. And it was Jeff's work, not only as a writer, but as a policymaker and a funder of that work, that brought us to the child tax credit of 1921, which miraculously, they gave money to families, and you know what happened? The child poverty rate was cut in half. We do a podcast now called The Invisible Americans, and we talk about the 13 million children in this country. People who know that we're doing a podcast about child poverty think we're talking about other countries somewhere. We're talking about 13 million of our own children. Just like Memphis of so many years ago that brought Martin Luther King to that city to help those sanitation workers and to help the other impoverished people. There are a couple of great programs that are out. The state of Michigan just gave $240 million to RX Kids to do the same thing, mothers and their babies, to support them for 3 years. The Bridge Project that started in a community in New York City now works in 11 states, giving money to mothers and their children for 3 years to get them started. So that this is what, we need to be thinking about. If we're looking at the legacy of Martin Luther King, who went to the core of what was wrong with America, and that we have to fix this core before anything else can be fixed. My minister who runs the food pantry at the Church of the Ascension, Father Ed, Ascension is in downtown Manhattan. He is passionate about feeding the hungry, and he spends the entire time between pantry sessions talking about the vegetables, what we found, we got this. And when the people arrive, he's like, they're, so happy that we are able to fulfill, that need. But it was Father Ed, who reminded me, Martin Luther King actually had a prescription for all of this about how we work our way out of all of the things that we want. Now, the 4 principles, again, that came out of the Birmingham jail. We have to find out what the truth is. And so I say to you all, no matter what you hear or what you see, your own eyes are not lying. I give you that credit. You know what's true. And don't be fooled and persuaded into thinking that, oh, I did not see that, So you know the facts, you know the truth. Number 2 is negotiation. Can the change be brought about by usual methods? Can we vote somebody in? Can we work on the school board? Can we do X, Y, and Z? Figure that out. Self-purification. That's one of the things I said to Father Ed. What does that mean? He says, are you as an individual spiritually ready to do what is necessary? And then the 4th thing is direct action. And what that is creating what we would call a scene. In other words, it is making sure that people realize what is happening is indecent, because that is the thing that often moves people. So never mind the equal, never mind whatever, but is it indecent? And those are the steps that, that we have to follow. So the Reverend Howard Thurman, getting back to Boston University in my closing, in his writing said, there are 2 questions we have to ask ourselves. The first is not only where am I going, but the second question is, who is going with me? Who's going with me? As you heard earlier, we're going together. The answer is we are going to build a better democracy, because the one we had, even before the latest troubles that some of us understand as troubles, the one we had wasn't all that great, because this country had such major problems. So we are building a better democracy. We're going together and we're building a better democracy. This morning, the Reverend Wendell Lancaster of the Greater Hood Memorial AME Zion Church, who knew that I was speaking today, dedicated his sermon to me. And he had texted me last night and I'm talking about Timothy. I didn't even know, don't tell anybody, I didn't even know there was a Timothy in the Bible, But 2 Timothy, I had to go looking. Okay, yes, it's Paul in a letter to Timothy. And in that letter, he says, this is what we need to understand about where we are now, because this is a matter of endurance going forward, building our better democracy. He said, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. And we all know this part, I have kept the faith. And that's exactly what we need to do. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Lift up